Welcome to the Harvest Series podcast. We are here in Kaplankaya on the southwestern Aegean coast of Turkey, where inspiring musicians, practitioners, artists and speakers are gathered for a few days, and I'll be interviewing some of them. I hope you'll enjoy this episode. What does it take to imagine a different life when the world has already decided who you are? Our guest today is one of the most powerful voices on redemption, justice, and transformation. After spending nearly 2 decades in prison in the US, he rebuilt his life, his identity, and his purpose. But more than surviving incarceration, he has become a voice asking deeper questions. How to interrupt violence, how to rebuild after devastation, and how do we imagine a future bigger than our worst mistakes. He's the author of How to Be Free, a proven guide to escaping life's hidden prison, a New York Times bestseller. Shaka Senghor, welcome to Harvest.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Me too. I'm very happy to have you here in the podcast. You gave a wonderful speech at Harvest. Everybody was very emotional and so happy to know your story. You're a fabulous storyteller. This season at Harvest is about imagination. For some people, imagination is creativity. For you, I imagine it may also have been survival.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about the power of imagination, I don't think that we can consider it without taking under, consideration that it's always been about survival. It's the way that fire was created, and food and cooking, and all these things required people to imagine a different way of being and a different way of nourishing life. For me, obviously it gets a little bit more granular based on the reality that I was incarcerated for a very long time. I was in solitary confinement for a very long time, which required me to really be able to mentally step outside of those cells and those barriers and to think about what was possible for my life. Even though I was in an environment where they were telling me I was never getting out of prison, I still had to believe that there was something on the other side of that. And that's the power of imagination. It allows you to break through barriers that other people try to impose on you.
When you were in isolation, I think it was 7 years.
Yes.
And that's long time in a small cell alone. Did imagining another self become a form of freedom in a way?
Yeah, so I did a total of 7 years. The longest stretch I did was 4.5 years straight. And it was 23-hour lockdown 5 days a week and 24-hour lockdown the other 2 days. And being able to... It didn't start when I first went down. It took time. I started off journaling and really asking myself tough questions. I was reading a lot of philosophy, and I remember coming across this line by Socrates that said that unexamined life isn't worth living. And that led to me really pondering that statement, which eventually I started journaling and just asking myself these tough questions. And as I was doing that, I got to a space where I just started to rewrite the narrative, like literally in my journal, like, here's who I will become. Here's what my life will look like. And that's what it was like to imagine something different in an environment that, does not nurture or encourage imagination at all.
Can we go back to the little boy you were before what happened and share your story?
Yeah, so I grew up in the city of Detroit. It's my hometown. It's still my favorite city in the world, even though I live in LA, which is like my second favorite. I grew up in a household with a lot of child abuse. And when I was about 13 or 14 years old, I ran away, and I was just this naive kid. I thought I would like go and live in some other parent's house that would take care of me. And instead I found myself deeply immersed in the drug trade. And this was like the beginning of the crack cocaine era in Detroit. I don't know how it existed, throughout the rest of the world, but during that time period, it was just like almost like a plague entered our community and really tore it apart. And the casualties of that, kind of war on drugs was young people who got seduced into this culture by adults, and in that culture, I experienced everything. I experienced, my childhood friend being murdered and being robbed at gunpoint and being beaten nearly to death. And about 3 years in, I was shot multiple times. And 16 months later, I shot and tragically caused a man's death. And that led to me being sentenced to 17 to 40 years in prison. I eventually served a total of 19 years. And, prison in America is very barbaric. It is not designed to help people come out better. It is really designed to help people come out worse. I was really fortunate. I just met some incredibly brilliant mentors I was fortunate for two things. One, I met incredible mentors, but two, I was also literate in an environment where the average reading grade level was third grade.
The judges didn't really, I think you said, listen to why you shot the person. It was very quick for you and surprising, and you had a story. It's not like if you're trying to find an excuse, because you mentioned that you are responsible for what you did, but
Absolutely.
things happened to you as a child, and nobody really was interested in that story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the things that's problematic in America when you think about gun violence. I think that young inner city kids get shot, and nobody takes that serious. Nobody talks about PTSD. Nobody talks about environmental trauma that exists in community. I mean, in my family alone, at least 10 people have been shot. And like when you think about that number, just in one family, it sounds preposterous to the rest of the world. But in the inner city, where it's just a normal part of life, we're constantly navigating that. And so to explain it, sometimes people can interpret it as an excuse. And like, I make no excuses. Like, I committed a crime, I was sentenced, I served that time, and it's one of the most regrettable things that I've ever done. And obviously, if I can go back and undo something of that magnitude, of course I would do it. Because I can't, I think it's important for me to talk about how a kid can go from being, dreaming of being a doctor and an artist to finding themselves with a gun in their hand. And that, to me, is like the biggest part of my responsibility, is to share what happened so that we can prevent it from happening. And sometimes people are open to it, and other times they're not.
When you heard the sentence, that was quite heavy. What did you think as a young kid? You were only 19 years old.
When I got sentenced at 19, I literally thought my life was over. I was like, there's no way that I can see 17 years down the line. It was just not possible, at that age to even imagine, that seemed so far away. And so I got into a lot of trouble. When I went into the prison, I just rebelled. I was angry. I was bitter. I was disappointed. I couldn't even, there was not a world where I was like, man, this is how my life should end up. And so I rebelled against all those emotions and got into tons of trouble, and got my security level increased to like the highest security level. And that's what it was like being a 19-year-old kid coming face to face with my responsibility.
So what changed you, and who changed you? You mentioned some mentors. Did you meet nice people? And what's the story of the transformation in prison?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not one transformative story. It's a series of things that took place over an extended period of time. But I contribute a lot of these things to just meeting incredibly inspiring people who saw something in me I didn't see in myself at the time. I was a broke, hurt little boy. And these men, they saw that I had intelligence. They knew that I can read and things of that. And so they guided me to books, and we would just have the most incredible debates. And I mean, sometimes they escalated, and it potentially was, close to violent outbursts because we were so passionate about what we were debating. But these men were brilliant. They were serving life sentences. Some of them have died in prison. Some of them have finally come home after 50 years or so, 40 years or so in prison. But they were just brilliant. They mentored the young men in an environment. They guided us to books, and they challenged us to think differently. So that was kind of the beginning part of the work. The other part of the work was a lot of just meditation and journaling and mindfulness, and like learning these different practices that I can apply in real time, it was all foreign to me at the time. Like, I had never heard of meditation, but once I started reading about it, I was like, oh, let me try it. And then of course it was like super scary to like sit with your own thoughts and try to clear your mind and be open to the void of nothingness is really hard to get there. But practicing and consistently showing up in that space was transformative.
Because your chance was that you were smart boy as a kid and literate.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like really being literate was a game changer. It was something that I consider one of the strokes of luck that I had was that I could actually read and read books that challenged how I thought, that shared other stories of people who had overcome hard things. I think that we often need to have those lived experiences to kind of draw inspiration from or what's possible. And, reading Malcolm X's autobiography and seeing this man sit in a cell and read from A to Z was unbelievable.
What in Malcolm X's life talked to you?
I think there was the two things that spoke to me about Malcolm's life was his curiosity. He was a genuinely organic intellectual. He didn't go to formal school to learn. He really taught himself. He was, a great student, which was, incredibly inspiring. And then his personal discipline, the discipline to like read the dictionary A to Z is unbelievable. And so those things about Malcolm really inspired me.
So, can you tell me more about the person who encouraged you, who supported you in becoming a writer?
Oh wow! So yeah, I mean, there was it's so interesting. I talked yesterday in my talk about Tom Scheit, who was a supervisor that I worked for when I was in prison, and he was one of the first people that wasn't serving time that read some of my works. It was almost like a little spark, but I didn't become a writer until years later. But I never forgot his reaction to reading some of my first writing.
So, who
And
was Tom for you?
so Tom was a man that I worked for. He was the recreation supervisor. And he was just incredible, this incredible human being that worked inside the prison. But he always showed up with joy in his heart. He always showed up with laughter and, his humanity. He really brought that into the room. But when it comes to my actual writing journey, I was my first cheerleader. I was my first kind of test case for my own writing of just like writing things and coming back and reading it later. And then the men in the environment, once I began to take it serious, they were so supportive. They were my early readers. And then it got to the point where like it would be a line outside my door of people checking to see where they were at on the list to read my works. And like, that's something I never forget. Those men took time out to read my words and, let me know what they thought. Let me know where I needed to develop the story further and what they loved and what they didn't like. And it's just so great to be engaged. Like even now to this day, as a writer who, I've been really successful across 3 books. I've done interviews with the who's who. I still enjoy talking directly to readers. I still love being in those conversations and, seeing when they're like, oh, this thing kept me up at night, or I got mad about this part, or I love this part. This made me cry. This made me laugh. I never want to lose that feeling. I never want to lose that touch of really being connected to the people who just take the time out to read my work.
You said your challenge was to do an examen of your life.
Yes.
What was the process of this, and what did it bring you to do that? Did you have to force, because it's not comfortable to examine someone's life, everybody? And how did you do that? How deep did you go?
That's a great question. I think it's one of the scariest and most courageous things any of us can ever do is to really sit with ourselves, with our true story, not the story we make up and not the stories that's made up about us, but the essence, all the things that we don't talk about, the things that we are ashamed to form words around, to share with other people or just with ourselves. And so when I went on that journey, I started journaling and I just had an agreement with myself. Whenever I sat down to write, I can only begin at the point where I was willing to be completely honest. No matter how painful, no matter how sad, no matter how happy, joyful, whatever the thing was, I have to be completely honest with myself. And part of my practice was I would just write and not go back. But if I was writing in a very particular emotion, I would come back and read it days later. Like whenever I was angry, I would like write and I would just be so raw and so honest. And then I would come back and be like, wow, like you have to fix that. You have to heal that. Where is it coming from? Because I started to really be able to connect the dots between what were the things I'm responsible for and then what are the things that happened to me. And it's been unbelievable. It's been an incredible gift to myself and to others to be that vulnerable and that open. And it's scary. It's scary to write the things out that require you to think and to process in a real way, but it's also liberating when you just let it go.
Did you imagine that one day you would be a New York Times, at that time, a New York Times bestseller?
When I first started writing, I didn't know what would become of it initially. And then through the process, I realized that I'm very ambitious and I have a spirit of like resilience that is, I'm going to figure a way out. And so I was learning that as I was writing, I was learning these things about myself that I was like, oh, I'm in this area. I'm very confident. I'm very excited to pursue this and to go after it. And then I just started looking at like, what is the biggest goal I can set for myself? And it was two goals. One was to be interviewed by Oprah Winfrey. Well, one was to have her read one of my books, and the other was to become a New York Times bestselling author. And so I wrote those things down. Here's what I want for my life, and to be, it's such an interesting thing, especially growing up in America. I'm not sure how it is in the rest of the world, but there's this kind of thing of like, if you desire something, you should be modest in your expression of that. And to me, it's the most ridiculous thing because I think of it from this lens. Like I'm a very spiritual person, and I don't know if there's one God, 10 gods, 1,000 gods, whatever. Whatever that energy is, what I do know is when I look at the universe, when I look at the stars, and I look at the sun, and I look at the ocean and the sea, and its majesty, there is nothing humble about that. There's nothing humble about that. And if we're interconnected to whatever brought all of this amazing stuff into the universe, why shouldn't we show up in that energy? And so that's what my counter is when people are like, well, you shouldn't think too big. Why? Like we haven't even explored the depths of the ocean. We haven't explored jungles that we coexist with. We're just even figuring out how far we can go out into the universe and the sky. And so when I think of like what I'm capable of or what is possible for my life, I'm like, why play small? And so one of my when I mentor kids, I always tell them this: never settle for mediocrity when greatness is available. And because there's no reason to play small in the world. And so I have very ambitious goals. I wrote them down. I want to be a New York Times bestseller. I want Oprah to read my books. I want to write movies and TV and all the things. I want to see how far I can push this creative thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned like you are spiritual now. Have you
Yes.
always been spiritual? Did you start as a kid? Do you feel already spiritual? Or did you cultivate that in prison?
So as a kid, I had this interesting relationship with the idea of God. And I realized this recently that I always felt like the people who talked to me about God weren't completely honest. I felt like they told a one-sided story of like, there's this being that is all good, that is all about your blessings and your care. But I was living in an environment where cruelty came from those same people. And so I had this contradiction of like, how can there be a God when the world is so cruel? And so as a kid, I was always questioning, even though I was told that you shouldn't question God, which I thought was ridiculous. And so it evolved over the years. I've studied different religions. I think that the religious texts are some of the most beautiful expressions of like what's possible for humanity. Whenever I'm reading, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, the Dhammapada, they're just so rich with just wisdom and all these amazing stories. But what I landed on is that the real spiritual text to me is the human heart. And that is the greatest scripture is the world that we live in, like the trees and the plants and the sky and the beauty of nature. I'm also a nerd, by the way. But that to me is if you can appreciate that in the most delicate of ways, like that to me embodies, spirituality and the idea of higher power that brought all of this into existence. And so I don't like any structure. I think it's like one of my kind of reactions to being incarcerated for a long time. So I love fluidity. I like the ability to explore, to be curious. It's almost like if you land on something that you definitely believe, then how do you intellectually grow? And so that was for me. It's like I want to continue to grow and evolve and just be present in that way.
Did it help you to forgive? Because I think your relationship involves a lot of forgiveness, to forgive yourself. Did you forgive your mother, the people who shot you? What's your relationship with forgiveness, and how did you build it, and are you still healing, forgiving, or is it done, okay, behind you?
Yeah, forgiveness is such an integral part of my journey. Actually, in my latest book, it is one of the most powerful chapters of the book. And a couple of years ago, I got a letter from the man who shot me. And I remember getting this letter, and I had never seen this guy's face because we literally had an argument, a 30-second argument. He pulled out a gun, he shot me multiple times. And it wasn't until I got the letter and he's incarcerated, he's serving a life sentence for shooting and killing somebody else. And I got this letter and I was able to look him up on the prison website. And just seeing his face for the first time, like in detail, it was very therapeutic. It was very healing. And so I decided to write him a letter back. And then about halfway through writing him a letter back, I balled the letter up and I decided not to write him back. Because to me, forgiveness, didn't require me to send him a letter. It just required me to let go of whatever I was holding on to. But instead, I actually wrote a letter to my mother, who I had been on this healing journey with and working through our own forgiveness. And I wrote this letter to her about what it meant for her and I to spend time. We had spent a couple of weeks together, took her on like a vacation. And it was the first time, one, that we've ever had traveled out of state together or spent any significant time. And it was incredible. My mother was willing to go into very vulnerable spaces to help me understand how she became abusive. And I just felt like it was the most courageous thing a parent can do is to say, hey, here's what happened to me as a kid. And here's how the things that happened to me shape the things that I did to you. And my willingness to hold space for her without anger, I think was also healing for her. And so that chapter is definitely one of my favorite chapters in the book. And I think it's been the one chapter that people have found the most use from.
How do you interrupt the cycle of violence? Because you're in the middle of the chain. You've been shot.
Yeah.
You shot. You forgive. You heal your mother. How do you interrupt the cycle?
Yeah, I think it's a really dear friend of mine, Ben Horowitz. Me and him, we talk about these things. And one time we were just kind of talking about inner city life versus, the rest of the world and how do we solve problems? And he was like, you really have to think about it as like man versus the gods, right? With the system being the gods. And oftentimes we think we're fighting a man battle or a woman battle or a human battle, but in reality, we're fighting a system. And so there's been so many systemic failures that really does not address inner city gun violence in any real way. And it's in America, it's rooted in racism. The number of black kids that get shot in America, like specifically black boys, if these were white boys, like that would be labeled a clear epidemic. There would be every resource imaginable thrown at the problem to really make sure that when people experience gun violence, they get therapeutic help, they get environmental support. But because it happens to black boys in America, it's not considered the health crisis it is, because black males in America has been the world's problem to solve. And that's what the racism of a system looks like.
Okay.
What happens is we're always dealing with racism, this kind of interpersonal thing where it's like, I don't care if you don't like black people. You don't have any power or agency to do anything to impact my life. I do care if the system is against black people, because that actually happens to impact lives in a real way. And what happens is we put all the focus and attention on whether the person who lives next door is a racist or not, which really doesn't matter because they don't control any real outcomes. But if the system is inherently racist and biased, that is very problematic because it causes extreme amounts of harm. And so it's really hard to navigate it. What I do try to do in my own work is talk about the cycle without making an excuse. It's a real cycle. I started experiencing gun violence very early on in my life, so it was normative behavior to retaliate. You know, you get shot, you shoot someone.
Yeah.
And so the way that I've worked on disrupting that is, one, we've been doing a lot with people who have been shot, working with those who, are going through their own journey, and just sharing stories with policymakers and organizational leaders and things of that. It's not as much of my work now at this stage, but it'll always be an integral part of my work.
If you had the power to change one thing in the system, where would you start?
Relative to ending gun violence in
Yes,
the community,
yeah.
I would make it mandatory that every community had therapeutic support, that there were mentors and as well as therapists available from a very early age in schools and community. That's what I would change.
What do people who committed crimes ask you most often?
I think people who are still stuck in that cycle of criminality, who want a way out, I think the question I often get is how. It's so interesting. So I go in prisons all the time. I would say the number one question I get from men and women in prison is, how do they go back to a community that they come from where crimes were committed and not go back to the same people they were around? It's the hardest thing ever, is to build new friendships that are not aligned with your old life. It's very lonely, and especially the older you get as adults, the harder it is to make friends. And those social circles really matter. It's the number one question that people ask me. Is like, okay, well, how did you go back to the neighborhood and not, fall in with those guys who you used to be with? For me, it was simple. Like, they had all abandoned me when I went to prison. So
Okay.
as much as I forgive, I don't forget. Like, I don't forget what it's like to have people leave you that say that they love and care about you. And for me, I just realized those people didn't love and care about themselves because I didn't at the time. And if they're still in that same space, I don't want to be around someone who doesn't care about themselves.
Today, you talk to both privileged and underprivileged people. How do you navigate this? What do each other don't understand about each, and what do they have in common?
That's such a great question. I have the most fun, ridiculously complex life because I can literally be, with some of the richest people in the world one day, and I can be like in the hood the next day. And I love it. I love that I get a chance to navigate these worlds, because what it's done is it's proven this theory I've had all along, is that we're way more alike than we are different. Mm-hmm. And I think that people will get so shocked when they hear that someone who's financially successful is having a tough day. And we have this weird thing where we're like, well, they should not be allowed to have a tough day. The reality is they're human. Humans grieve, humans feel shame, they feel embarrassment. Money does not change that. And the same with, sometimes people who are wealthy, they're like, oh my God, those poor people down there. And they don't realize that these people have joyful lives. They're amazing. They have
Yeah.
humor. They're intelligent. They have all the things that we have. So I think the thing that's special to me is that I get a chance to navigate these worlds without switching who I am. I'm the same in every space. I talk the same. I because I don't want to be friends with anybody where I can't be authentically myself. Like that's not interesting to me. But yeah, people are way more similar. They care about the same things. People want the best for their children. They want the best outcomes for their own lives. It's not like people wake up and be like, you know what, I want my life to suck.
Yeah.
What happens is they get
Right.
caught in a loop, trauma loop,
Or
poverty loop,
systems.
systemic things, and then they're fighting and fighting and fighting. And at some point, you get tired of fighting. And I think that's the thing that I found in common with a lot of people, especially, during the pandemic, it was so interesting to me how people responded. Like, I have people that I know who are like, had the most amazing properties, the most amazing resources, and they were really struggling during the pandemic. And they were struggling with feeling isolated, with not having certainty, all the things that really makes us human. And so it's been really interesting. I think that they would be shocked to know that have way more in common and than other people. Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who wants to forgive himself or herself or someone else?
So the advice that I have for people who struggle with lack of forgiveness is you get a chance to decide whether you want to be weighted down by somebody else's behavior. And every day that you choose to stay stuck in whatever anger, whatever sadness you're in, you're agreeing that you're not worth fighting for. Like you're in agreement. Like you have to be in agreement with your own suffering to stay stuck in that loop. Forgiveness doesn't change the other person. It just reorients you to saying, hey, I'm actually worth living a lighter life, a more love filled life, a more happy, joyful life. And the only way I'm going to get to that is if I give up these things that cause me to suffer and holding on to something where you can't change another person. You can't change what happened in the past. It doesn't exist anymore. Even in your mind, it doesn't exist in the way that it happened. We just make it up. We make up the story over and over. Every time we think about the thing, we think about it differently. And it changes and it reorients, and it's never the exact story. But yet we will just suffer as a result. And when you let it go, it's unbelievable. It's really amazing feeling.
It applies when you want to forgive yourself too.
Absolutely.
Same.
And that's the toughest. It's way harder to forgive ourselves than it is to forgive others. And I think largely because we have not figured out how to navigate shame. Shame is such a, I mean, it is one of the greatest hidden prisons of all. Is what stops us from being able to forgive ourselves is the shame that we attach to like whatever the thing is that we feel like we should have done. And then the other part of the shame oftentimes is that what we're ashamed of is something that we probably didn't even have the power to change, and that's where I found with a lot of people is that they applied their adult understanding of a life to something that happened in their childhood. And then they're stuck because they're like, well, I should have fought harder. Like, dude, you were 8 years old.
Yeah.
Like, what were you going to do? Right? Or I should have did this like you were 10.
Yeah.
It's impossible. But we don't have a lot of grace for that inner kid part of us that really just, we can love on now. Like I remind myself, I always make sure that I'm intentional about loving on that little boy that was failed by everybody around him. And like, I'm so intentional about that.
What does masculinity still get wrong today?
So I think the whole conversation around masculinity and toxic masculinity and all these things, I think some of them are BS to me, because I feel like now we're going to the other extreme where we want men to be effeminate in order to prove that they're masculine, and I think it's ridiculous. I think I can show up in love, I can show up in kindness, and I can watch fighters smash their face in and find joy in that.
Okay,
I
yeah.
don't feel like I have to compromise one of the others. So I think what we get wrong is that what we deem solely as a masculine thing, whenever it's harmful, it's not a masculine thing. It's just a human being who is showing up in a very harmful way. And I think that's what we've just over indexed on trying to get everything politically correct. And I just don't think it's healthy. You know, I think that young boys are different. I think we're wired biologically different. And I think that that's okay. Our the young boys are so destructive. You ever watch a little boy at play? Like that's genetically engineered. This build and destroy and all these things. Just like this rewiring. But those same kids can also be empathetic and compassionate. Like you don't have to trade off or give up one for the other. We just have to let these things be as long as they're not harmful to other people. And I think we just try to apply all this weird adult stuff that we haven't worked out onto these kids. We're like experimenting with kids and their identity when they're really just formulating and figuring things out. But we're trying to force something on them that I just don't think is healthy.
What do moms get wrong today?
Oh wow. I think that's a tough one to because I
Yeah.
don't think people think moms get anything wrong. But what I'll say is like as a mentor, whenever I'm mentoring young people, I realize I'm not just mentoring them; I'm mentoring the family that they come from. And what I think that moms are getting wrong in today's times is not allowing children to fail and not allowing them to build those kind of necessary building blocks for resilience in real time. I just think we're playing too safe with our kids. We're overprotective and well-meaning. I actually write in the new book. There's these well-intended hidden prisons, and what that looks like is the helicopter parent. It's like we know that their intentions are not wrong. They're not intending to cause long-term harm to their children. They think that they're protecting them, but what they're actually doing is causing this unnecessary frailty. And so I would say that I think that that's probably one thing. Most parents. I don't even think it's just moms, but most parents.
I said I would ask you this question. How do you live with the fact that you're often seen as a symbol of redemption while still being a very imperfect human like everyone else? And is it like a lot of pressure? And my question for you was, do you see one day where you wouldn't have to mention the name prison in your life and this will be like another chapter of your life?
Yeah, so it's one, I've never accepted other people's definition of what they think my work is in the world. I think it's however people see it, that's how they see it. I I didn't know that I would end up doing a lot of criminal justice reform work. Like my goal was to be an artist when I got out of prison. That's literally it. Like
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about. I knew I would always advocate for the people I left behind. Those were actually my friends in prison. But I didn't have any real burning desire to become like the face of like criminal justice. I've used my story to change laws and policies and all those things. That was a chapter in my life that was important. I don't have a desire to do that work anymore.
Yeah.
I support people who do it. I help kind of redirect funds to their work, or I make connections for them, etc. But I want to live my life as an artist. That's literally what's exciting to me. It's the chapter of my life I'm in. I'm writing fiction. I'm writing movies and for the stage and like
Music? You did some
I've
music?
done some music
Yeah.
with Nas, and then I did a song I'm waiting on with Big Sean. Then I actually a lesser known artist. He's incredible. I did a song with him a while ago that he just released that album yesterday, and he sent it to me. I haven't even listened to it yet, but yeah, I just want to have fun. I want to have fun, and
Yeah.
one day,
Good.
yeah, one day people will focus on me, the writer, and the creator and producer, and So that's the chapter of life I'm in.
Okay, sorry,
But,
that's a bit paradoxical because I'm the one asking you, and I kept asking you a question about your past. And you mentioned at lunch the other day that you also had in mind to do like your first first fiction
yes,
novel. So
yes.
that's a big step, no? I guess as
Yeah,
a writer.
it's super exciting. So what people don't know is I actually started as a fiction writer. So
But
I
you never
wrote,
published it.
right. So well, I originally self-published
Okay.
when I first got out. Well, actually, I self-published a book from prison, and then I self-published 4 books after prison, and just was hustling those out of the trunk. And I built a small little audience of those books, but I'm a different writer today. I really understand like story development and character development, and I'm like, I really want these works to exist in the broader world. And so I'm editing those originals and adding new layers and new characters, and it's almost like writing a new book because there's so much that I've added. But I'm so excited about it. Like it's my favorite. My plots are unbelievably like dope. It's like so fun to write and to be lost in that world. I just wrote my first screenplay, which was really exciting because it's like I like writing about prison and I like writing about crime in the streets because I know that world in a real way.
So it's
But
detective story.
yeah. But it's so fun to like make up stories that aren't real. Like that's really fun to me. So, and I'm really good at it. So
So
it's
when
like,
do you think, because you said like you wrote your book in 30 days, maybe not this
yeah.
one.
Yeah, so well, we got a very aggressive editing timeline. So I'm trying to have 2 books fully edited by August. And so we
Wow.
started, so it's like 90 days sprint. Me and my editor is working toward it, but I think we're going to do it. I'm excited. Yeah.
If this chapter of your life was to end today or tomorrow, what would you like to be your legacy in this world?
What I would like to be my legacy in this world is one of just pure resilience. I think that we're way more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. And I think that oftentimes we only look at the extreme levels of resilience before we're like, oh, that person is really resilient. But I didn't go into anything hard knowing that I would survive it or that I would overcome or that I would arrive at a different perspective than anybody else in those circumstances. And I think that's true for anyone. Like we don't know what we're made of until we're like actually challenged to have to do something difficult. Um, so I would hope that my life serves as a metaphor of like, one, we can do difficult things, but 2, we also can create magical moments anytime we commit to the idea that we're worth existing in those magical moments. And so that's what I really live my life in. Like, I'm so curious. I try stuff. I figure it out. I mean, I take risk. If I see something I'm interested in doing, I'm like, okay, well, how do I do it? And then I'll do the research and be like, okay, well, I got to submit an application. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But my willingness to try is like incredible, and it's one of the things that I actually truly appreciate about myself that I'm willing to try. And I may not be successful at it, but I will give it a good old college try for sure. I'll go after it. And so I want people to feel that energy to be like, it's not just the big things I've accomplished, it's the other things of like, oh, he was willing to put himself out there and willing to, just show up. And it's really interesting. You go back through the threads of my life, everything that I've done, it was initiated by me. Like I would just be like, all right, well, I want to try this. What does that look like? I would go volunteer.
Wow.
And like that's the game. That's why I don't like structure, because structure freaks me out, because then I started to think about the rules, which means I won't break them. And I was like, no, I'm just like, go try some stuff and figure it out. And then, oh, there's rules to this. I didn't know.
That's inspiring. Huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Harvest is entering a pause or ending. We don't know. But do you have an advice to deal with the end of something that was meaningful for you?
I think the way that you close a thing out really matters. And you have to do it with finality. And I think the moment you start to teeter and second guess, you just leave a thing too open and it never quite resolves itself. I remember when I was moving from from Detroit to Los Angeles, and I had a home that I owned outright, I had bought. And I remember all my friends and family being like, you shouldn't sell your home. You should like keep it and rent it out, etc. And what I knew is that if I didn't sell it, I would never make a full commitment to living in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Because I can always go back. I can always be like, all right, well, I'm going to live there and here or whatever. And I was like, no, I'm going to sell the home and I'm going to keep it moving. I'll get another house. Maybe, maybe not. I don't really care. What I'm called to do is bigger than that. And so I took that leap of faith. And I ended up getting another home in LA. So I have a home now out there. And at some point, I'll probably sell that one too and just move on to the next adventure. I don't know what it is, but there's the next adventure calling me.
So intentional closure.
Yes.
Right. One guest left a question for you.
Okay.
So it's Michael Pollan, plants and mind explorer and journalist. Yeah. He asked, what has the process of writing taught you about your own mind?
Oh, this is like one of my favorite type of questions. Thank you, Michael. The process of writing has really taught me that there is no limit to where we can go with our ideas. And it really taught me that I have to trust my own brilliance and to not play small with that, to just really revel in words. Like I love the art form. I love the process. It really feeds my soul in a deep way when I can go and write something and feel like, wow, this came out of me. Sometimes it's a word that I'm like, I just instinctively know how to use. And I'm like, I don't know when I learned that word. There's some words that I use where I'm like, oh, I remember exactly where I learned that word, and I remember looking this word up, etc. But there's times when I'm in like this writing flow, and there's words that just come so beautiful and so elegantly and so magically, and it really taught me how to be fully present with myself, fully present with the process, to fall in love over and over with my mind. Like that's one of the things that I think it's so special, is to fall in love with your own mind and not be afraid of what you discover there. And then you'll discover a lot. You through writing you discover a lot of things about yourself. What makes you really laugh, what makes you emotional, what makes you feel love and romance and anger and injustice. And you get a chance to explore all these things and figure out what the hell do you really believe. And like that's the power of writing. It's like, what do you really believe about the world that you live in? And it's such a magical journey to be on. I crave in this stage of my life, it's really been super strong on me in like the last 90 days. It's just I want to do a writer's residency where I can just lean into like the magic and beauty, but feel taken care of in that experience. I write in chaos all the time. It's what I do on planes and in my office while my kid has something he wants and the wife needs something and the maintenance people are coming and all the things. And I'm just super excited to really have space to just see what that's at this stage of my writing career. So
without interruption.
Yeah.
Do you have our next guest is Jana Levin. She's a black hole and universe specialist, scientist. Do you have a question for her?
Yeah, I have kind of like a two-part question. And so my question is, if there was a place out there in the wide universe, a planet, whatever, that you can go to and visit and spend a week there, what is the album that you would take to listen to?
Nice question. Okay. I will ask her. Thank you so much for sharing. Shaka Senghor, thank you for your honesty, your courage, and for reminding us that we need to follow our dreams.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a joy to sit and talk with you.
Thank you so much. And from Capocaya, thank you for being part of Harvest. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe if you liked it and if you want to watch more. And see you soon.